On their 25th wedding anniversary, a wife stood before friends and family to deliver what everyone assumed would be a heartfelt speech. But instead of celebrating love and loyalty, she exposed her husband's secret affair with their neighbor. The shocking revelation didn't end there. It hinted at something far more sinister, leaving everyone stunned and questioning the truth about their seemingly perfect lives. If you're ready to uncover the twists and turns of this jaw-dropping story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. The garden was lit with soft string lights, casting a golden glow over the rows of elegantly arranged tables. Friends and family gathered, laughing and reminiscing about the couple's 25 years of marriage. The atmosphere felt warm, almost magical, as the wife stood at the center of it all, her smile radiant, her eyes reflecting both pride and love. For years, she had poured her heart into this relationship, enduring highs and lows, believing in the unshakable bond they had built. The husband stood beside her, charming and composed, thanking everyone for being part of their journey. Guests shared fond memories of the couple, raising glasses to toast their enduring love. Everything about the night seemed perfect, yet a faint tension lingered beneath the surface, an unspoken unease that only the wife truly felt. As the evening unfolded, her heart battled conflicting emotions. Behind the smile she wore, there was a storm brewing, a truth too heavy to keep hidden. She had learned something in the past weeks that changed everything she believed about her marriage. For now, she kept it to herself, biding her time, knowing the moment for revelation would soon come. Her gaze shifted to the neighbor, a woman who had been more than just a friendly face. She was part of the couple's close circle, trusted and welcomed into their home countless times. The wife's lips tightened. She thought of the evidence she had discovered, the hushed phone calls, the text messages, and the late-night encounters that her husband had thought were well hidden. It all led to one undeniable truth. Her husband and this woman had betrayed her in the most unimaginable way. But this was not just about infidelity. No, this betrayal had far darker implications. The wife had stumbled upon something more sinister, something that made her decision to expose the affair not just about heartbreak, but about survival. And tonight, in front of everyone they held dear, she would reveal the truth and force them to face the consequences. The days leading up to the anniversary had been a whirlwind of emotions for the wife. After accidentally discovering a series of suspicious text messages on her husband's phone, she began connecting the dots. At first, she tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was overthinking, maybe it wasn't what it seemed. But as the pieces came together, there was no denying the truth. Her husband had been carrying on an affair with the neighbor for months, possibly even years. She recalled a moment that now felt like a cruel joke. The neighbor bringing over a homemade casserole just a week ago, smiling warmly, pretending to care. The betrayal cut deeper than just the affair. It was the lies, the manipulation, the audacity to carry on this deceit under her nose. But then came the twist. One night, unable to sleep, the wife searched deeper into her husband's things, hoping for clarity. That's when she found something chilling, a blood-stained scarf tucked inside an old duffel bag in the garage. Her mind raced. It didn't make sense, but her instincts told her it was connected to the affair. The scarf wasn't hers, and it didn't belong to anyone in the household. She began to notice other strange behaviors. Her husband grew increasingly paranoid, checking locks and glancing out windows late at night. He became distant, irritable, snapping at the smallest things. Meanwhile, the neighbor, who once visited regularly, now avoided their home altogether. Something wasn't adding up. Then she heard the rumors. A man from the neighborhood, a recluse who lived a few houses down, had gone missing weeks ago. The police had made inquiries but found no leads. The wife couldn't ignore the unsettling thought. Was her husband involved? Was this neighborly affair just the tip of the iceberg? By the time the anniversary arrived, she had resolved to expose everything, not just the affair, but the darkness lurking beneath it. She wanted answers, and if they wouldn't give them to her willingly, she would force them into the light. Tonight, with all eyes on them, she would make sure everyone knew the truth. The evening of the anniversary celebration continued, the air filled with laughter and the clinking of champagne glasses. Yet, beneath the surface, the wife's heart pounded in her chest, as if echoing the secrets she carried. She looked around at the guests, many of whom had been part of their lives for years, her close friends, her husband's co-workers, even the neighbor's family. How could they all be so unaware of the storm brewing within this seemingly perfect celebration? She watched her husband, who moved through the crowd with practiced ease, laughing and shaking hands, his charm in full display. To the world, he looked like the perfect partner, the devoted husband. But she knew better now. Every smile, every laugh felt like a dagger to her heart, a painful reminder of the man she thought she knew but didn't. Her eyes found the neighbor in the crowd. Dressed in a sleek black dress, she was the picture of calm, blending into the celebration like nothing was amiss. But there was something different tonight, something subtle but undeniable, a glint of nervousness in her eyes, a stiffness in her movements. The wife noticed how she avoided her gaze, keeping her distance as if afraid of confrontation. The wife gripped her wineglass tighter, the weight of her discovery pressing down on her. The scarf wasn't the only thing she had found. She had pieced together more than just the affair, odd transactions in their joint bank account, cash withdrawals that didn't align with their household expenses. Then there were whispers in the neighborhood, things she had dismissed at first, but now took seriously. A neighbor's comment about seeing her husband and the missing man arguing near the woods. The wife's mind spun with the possibilities. She replayed the scene in her head over and over. Her husband returning home late on a stormy night weeks ago, his clothes wet and his expression unreadable. At the time she had thought little of it. Now she wasn't so sure. As she stood there, pretending to listen to a guest recount an old story, her resolve hardened. This wasn't just about exposing the affair anymore. It was about uncovering the full extent of the darkness that surrounded her husband and the neighbor. The microphone sat on a stand near the head table, ready for speeches and toasts. Her husband had planned to give a heartfelt speech about their journey together, but she knew his words would be nothing but lies. Instead, she would take the stage, and when she did, she would lay it all bare. In her mind, she rehearsed her opening line, the words heavy with meaning. Tonight, I planned to celebrate love, loyalty, and trust. But instead, I've realized those things can be shattered when the truth comes to light. She could already picture the stunned faces, the gasps, the confusion turning to horror as she exposed not only the affair, but the sinister secrets she was beginning to suspect. The party swirled around her, but she stood still, gathering her strength. The moment was close, and she could feel the weight of what was to come. There would be no going back after this, no undoing the revelations that would shake not just her marriage, but everyone in that room. She looked at her husband one last time, watching the man she had loved for 25 years. In that moment, she realized this wasn't just a reckoning for him, it was a reckoning for her too. The truth, as painful as it was, had to come out, and tonight she would make sure it did. The night wore on, with the chatter of guests growing louder and the laughter more uninhibited as drinks flowed freely. The wife moved through the crowd with practiced poise, but every passing second felt like a tightening noose. Her resolve, however, only strengthened. She was no longer the dutiful, supportive wife standing in the shadows of her husband's facade. Tonight, she was a woman who had been wronged, and she was determined to take back her power. As the clock neared 9 p.m., it was time for the speeches. Her husband took the microphone first, his voice smooth and commanding as he addressed the crowd. He began with a charming anecdote about their early days together, the kind of story that brought nostalgic smiles and laughter from their friends. But to the wife, every word felt like a lie, each syllable coated in hypocrisy. Her gaze flicked to the neighbor who stood at the edge of the crowd, her posture stiff, her smile too forced. The wife noticed the neighbor glance nervously at her husband, their eyes meeting for a fleeting second. It was enough to confirm what she already knew. They were both scared of what she might do tonight. As her husband continued his speech, praising her as the love of his life, her fingers tightened around her glass. Love? The word felt like a mockery now, a hollow echo of something that once existed but had been buried under layers of deceit. She thought of the scarf, the bank transactions, the whispers of a missing man, and her husband's late-night excursions. It all painted a picture too dark to ignore. Finally, her husband raised his glass to toast their perfect marriage. The guests erupted into applause, cheers, and laughter. But the wife didn't join in. Instead, she stepped forward, her hands steady, her heart pounding. "Thank you," she began, taking the microphone from his hand, her voice calm but carrying a weight that immediately hushed the crowd. "Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight to celebrate what should have been a testament to love, trust, and loyalty." She paused, letting her words hang in the air, her eyes scanning the room. "But tonight, I realized something. Sometimes what we celebrate isn't real. Sometimes what we think we know about the people closest to us is nothing more than an illusion." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Her husband's smile faltered, his expression shifting to one of unease. The neighbor froze, her glass hovering mid-air, as if the words were a slap she hadn't seen coming. "I've spent 25 years in this marriage," the wife continued, her voice growing stronger, "believing in a partnership built on love. But the truth is, love can't exist without honesty, and trust can't survive betrayal." She turned to face her husband directly, her eyes locking with his. "And tonight, I'm done pretending." The room fell into stunned silence. Even the soft hum of the outdoor lights seemed to fade as the weight of her words sank in. Her husband tried to interject, his voice wavering. "What are you talking about?" he said, forcing a nervous laugh. She didn't flinch. "I know, Mark," she said, her voice unwavering now. "I know about the lies. I know about the affair." She pointed to the neighbor, whose face drained of color. "I know about her." Gasps filled the air, followed by a deafening silence. Guests turned to the neighbor, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. Some looked at her husband, who stood frozen, his confident demeanor crumbling. "But it's not just the affair, is it?" she added, her voice sharp now, laced with anger. "It's everything else. The lies, the secrets, the darkness you've been hiding." She paused, holding the microphone like a weapon. "Mark, where were you the night Sam Carter disappeared?" Her words struck like a thunderclap, the name sending a shiver through the crowd. Sam Carter, the missing man. The one whose absence had lingered over the neighborhood like an unspoken question. All eyes were on her husband now, his face pale, his composure shattered. The neighbor stumbled backward, nearly dropping her glass. I don't know what she's talking about," she stammered, her voice shaking. But the wife didn't stop. "Do you think I didn't notice? The late nights, the paranoia, the blood-stained scarf you tried to hide." Her voice cracked with emotion, but she pressed on, turning to the guests. "Did you all know? Did anyone suspect that my husband isn't just a liar, but someone who might be capable of something far worse?" The tension in the air was electric, the guests too stunned to move. Her husband tried again to speak, but his words faltered. The neighbor stood frozen, her eyes darting between him and the wife. For the wife, this was the breaking point, the moment she had been building toward. She had unleashed the truth, and there was no turning back now. The carefully constructed facade of their lives was crumbling, and the secrets buried beneath were finally clawing their way to the surface. The silence after her revelation was suffocating. The air felt thick with disbelief and tension, the kind that grips a room when a secret too big to contain has been laid bare. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. It was as if time had frozen, leaving everyone to process the gravity of what the wife had just revealed. Her husband, Mark, stood rooted in place, his face pale, beads of sweat glistening on his forehead. His confident demeanor had evaporated, replaced by a mix of shock and panic. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The neighbor, the woman who had shared their lives so intimately, looked equally stricken, her face pale as she shook her head in denial, her lips trembling. "That's ridiculous," the neighbor finally managed, her voice cracking. "She's lying. This is just some misunderstanding." The wife turned to her sharply, her eyes narrowing. "A misunderstanding," she said, her voice cold and sharp as a blade. "Don't insult everyone's intelligence. Do you think I haven't seen the messages? Do you think I don't know about the nights you spent together, or how you helped him cover his tracks?" The guests, previously frozen in stunned silence, began murmuring among themselves. Whispers rippled through the crowd as people exchanged glances, their faces a mixture of shock, pity, and disgust. The perfect couple they had come to celebrate was unraveling before their eyes, their picture-perfect lives exposed as a lie. Mark finally found his voice. "You don't know what you're saying," he stammered, stepping toward his wife. "This isn't the place. This isn't the time to talk about this." She stepped back, holding her ground. "Oh, it's the perfect time," she countered. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "You've lied to me for years, Mark. You've lied to everyone in this room. Tonight, the truth comes out. All of it." The mention of Sam Carter's name had shifted the mood entirely. The affair was shocking enough, but now there was something darker at play. Sam had been a loner, a quiet man who mostly kept to himself. When he disappeared weeks ago, people speculated but ultimately moved on, assuming he had left town for reasons of his own. But now, the wife's accusations suggested something far more sinister. "What does Sam have to do with this?" Mark demanded, though his voice lacked conviction. His eyes darted nervously around the crowd, as if looking for someone to back him up. "Everything," she snapped. "I know about the argument you had with him near the woods. People saw you, Mark. You thought no one was paying attention, but they were." "I never argued with him," Mark shouted, his voice rising in desperation. "You were seen, Mark," she said firmly. "And don't think I don't know about the scarf, the one you tried to hide in the garage, the blood-stained scarf. What was that, Mark? How do you explain that?" Gasps erupted from the guests, the weight of her words hitting them like a tidal wave. The neighbor, who had been silent until now, stepped forward, her hands raised as if pleading for calm. "This is getting out of hand," she said, her voice quivering. "You're making wild accusations without proof. We all know how stressed you've been lately. Maybe you're seeing things that aren't there." The wife turned to her, her expression unyielding. "Don't you dare," she hissed. "Don't you dare try to gaslight me. I've been quiet for too long, letting the both of you think you could get away with this. But not anymore." The neighbor's composure cracked, and tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't do anything," she mumbled, her voice barely audible. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, people visibly uncomfortable, yet unable to look away. Some guests began to edge toward the door, as if seeking an escape from the increasingly volatile situation, but others stayed, transfixed by the unfolding drama, wanting to see how it would end. Mark's anger flared. "Enough!" he shouted, his voice booming over the murmurs. "You're trying to humiliate me in front of everyone we know. You're making baseless accusations." The wife met his gaze, unflinching. "If you have nothing to hide," she said, her voice dangerously calm, "then why do you look so afraid?" Her words hung in the air, and for the first time, the confident, charismatic man who had charmed the room just an hour ago seemed completely undone. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched at his sides, but he said nothing. The wife turned to the crowd. "If anyone here has any doubts, I suggest you ask yourselves why Mark and the neighbor have been so quiet about Sam Carter, why they've both been acting so strangely these past few weeks, and why, when I started asking questions, I found things that don't add up." The neighbor's knees buckled, and she sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. Mark stood frozen, his face a mask of rage and fear, and the wife, standing tall and resolute, looked out at the crowd, knowing she had just unleashed a storm that would be impossible to contain. The silence that followed her accusations was shattered by a sharp, nervous laugh. It came from Mark, who seemed to have decided that mockery was his last defense. "This is insane," he said, his voice rising in disbelief. "Do you all hear this? She's spinning a web of lies to make me look like some kind of monster." But his laughter didn't land the way he hoped. The crowd wasn't laughing with him. Instead, there were looks of doubt, whispers exchanged in hushed tones, and more than a few skeptical glances. "Monster," his wife shot back, her tone cutting like glass. "I haven't even begun to describe what you are." She turned to the crowd, her voice rising with emotion. "You think I wanted to do this here in front of all of you? You think I wanted to destroy what little dignity I have left after 25 years of lies? No, I didn't. But I won't be silent anymore. Not when the truth is this dark." She stepped forward, her voice unwavering. "The scarf I found in our garage, it wasn't just blood-stained. It matched the description of something Sam Carter was last seen wearing before he disappeared." A wave of gasps swept through the crowd. Mark's face flushed red, but whether it was from anger, embarrassment, or fear, no one could tell. "That's enough," he bellowed, his voice shaking. "You're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing me." The wife narrowed her eyes. "Embarrassment," she said, her tone dripping with disdain. "Is that what you're worried about? Embarrassment? Not the fact that Sam Carter is missing, not the fact that people saw you arguing with him, not the fact that I found evidence connecting you to something far worse than an affair." The neighbor rose shakily to her feet. "I'm not part of this," she said, her voice quivering. "I didn't. Mark, you need to tell her the truth before this gets out of hand." The wife's head snapped toward the neighbor. "Out of hand?" she hissed. "It's already out of hand. It's been out of hand since you decided to crawl into my bed behind my back. And now you want to act like you're innocent in all this?" The neighbor's composure crumbled, and she began to cry. Some of the guests shifted uncomfortably, while others leaned in closer, captivated by the unraveling chaos. Mark's fists clenched at his sides. "Stop it," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I know more than you think," the wife shot back. "And if you're not going to tell the truth, Mark, maybe I should." The tension in the air was unbearable. Everyone was waiting, holding their breath, wondering what truth she was about to reveal. She didn't wait for him to respond. Her voice cut through the murmurs, sharp and commanding. Sam Carter didn't just disappear. He was scared. He told people he thought someone was following him. He told people he thought he was in danger. And now, I know why. Her words sent a chill through the crowd. The guests, who had initially dismissed Sam's disappearance as a fluke, now looked at each other, unease spreading like wildfire. "Sam confronted you, didn't he, Mark?" she said, stepping closer, her voice rising. "He knew something about you. About the affair? About the money?" Or was it something worse? Is that why he disappeared? That's ridiculous, Mark snapped, his voice breaking under the pressure. You're grasping at straws. Am I? She fired back. You were seen with him the night he disappeared. You were heard arguing. And then you came home soaked and angry, didn't you? What did you do, Mark? The crowd's murmurs grew louder, some guests edging closer as if they might miss something. The neighbor's sobs grew louder, her attempts to deny involvement now drowned out by the rising storm of accusations. Mark's face twisted in rage and panic. You don't have any proof, he shouted, his voice desperate. You're just making wild accusations because you're bitter and jealous. Proof? She echoed, her voice cold. I have enough to make people wonder, enough to make people start asking questions. The scarf, the blood, the missing money from our account. You think the police won't be interested in that? At the mention of the police, Mark's face changed. His confidence cracked, replaced by something raw, fear. For the first time, the crowd seemed to sense that her accusations weren't baseless. There was too much evidence, too many connections to ignore. Her voice softened, but the steel in her tone remained. So, Mark, she said, her words deliberate, if you want to save yourself, maybe you should start talking before someone else does. The room was silent again, all eyes on Mark. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched, and his breathing grew heavy. Everyone could see it now. This wasn't the reaction of an innocent man. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, You don't understand. The wife's heart raced. She had cracked him. Then make us understand, she said, her tone steady, unrelenting. The crowd waited, hanging on his every word. But instead of an explanation, Mark turned and bolted toward the back of the garden, disappearing into the night. Gasps and cries erupted as guests scrambled to process what had just happened. The wife stood frozen, her chest heaving, watching the man she had spent 25 years with run from the truth. It was far from over. If anything, the storm had just begun. The garden was in chaos. Guests murmured in frantic whispers, their eyes darting between the wife and the empty path where Mark had vanished. The neighbor collapsed into a chair, her face buried in her hands, her cries muffled but audible. The wife stood still, gripping the microphone tightly, her breath shaky but her resolve unbroken. She had known this night would be explosive, but even she hadn't anticipated the sheer magnitude of what she had unleashed. A voice broke through the noise. It was Detective Harris, a guest who happened to be in attendance. He stepped forward, his expression serious but calm. We need to contain this situation, he said firmly, addressing the guests. Everyone, stay where you are. No one leaves until we understand what's going on. The wife turned to him, relief and desperation washing over her. Detective, she said, her voice trembling but strong. He knows something about Sam Carter. He's been hiding things, evidence, lies, everything. You have to find him before he does something worse. Harris nodded, his expression unreadable as he pulled out his phone and made a call. This is Detective Harris, he said quickly. I need units dispatched to the residence of Mark and... He glanced at the wife for confirmation, and she gave her name. On an urgent matter. Suspect may be fleeing the scene. Possible connection to the Sam Carter case. The guests were now utterly silent, hanging on to every word. The wife could feel their stares, some sympathetic, others wary, and a few judgmental. But she didn't care. Her focus was on one thing, ensuring that Mark didn't escape the consequences of his actions. The neighbor suddenly spoke, her voice hoarse and panicked. I didn't know, she blurted out, looking up at the wife with red, swollen eyes. I swear I didn't know about Sam. I didn't... Don't, the wife snapped, her voice cold and cutting. Don't you dare try to make yourself the victim now. You were part of this. Maybe you didn't know everything, but you knew enough, and you kept quiet." The neighbor shrank back, unable to meet her gaze. Harris stepped between them, his tone firm. "Let's not escalate this further. We'll get to the bottom of it." The wife nodded, her composure returning as she took a deep breath. "Then start with the garage," she said. "The scarf is there, blood-stained. It was Sam's. I'm sure of it." Harris motioned for one of the other guests, a uniformed officer who had quietly revealed himself amidst the crowd, to follow him. "We'll secure the evidence," Harris said. He turned back to the wife. "If there's anything else, anything at all, you need to tell me now." She hesitated, her mind racing. There were so many pieces to the puzzle, so many moments that had seemed insignificant at the time, but now felt crucial. "The money," she said finally. "He's been making withdrawals, big ones from our account. I didn't think much of it at first, but now I'm sure it's connected. Check his bank records." Harris nodded again, his demeanor steady and focused. "We will." As the officers began moving toward the house, the wife felt a wave of exhaustion crash over her. The weight of what she had done, what she had revealed, was heavy, almost too much to bear. But she knew there was no turning back now. The crowd remained frozen, their faces a mixture of shock, fear, and curiosity. The wife turned to them, her voice firm but filled with emotion. "I know this is a lot to take in," she said, addressing them directly. "But you all needed to know. You needed to see the truth of what's been hidden behind the lies." No one responded, but she could see it in their eyes. They believed her now. Mark's reaction, his flight, had said more than her words ever could. As the night deepened, so did the mystery. Mark was out there somewhere, running from the truth. But the wife knew one thing with absolute certainty. He couldn't run forever. The darkness he carried would catch up to him, and when it did, she would be ready. The stillness of the night outside the garden was interrupted by the sound of police sirens in the distance. The wife stood near the edge of the crowd, her eyes fixed on the darkness where Mark had fled. She felt a strange mix of emotions, relief that she had finally exposed the truth, fear of what Mark might do next, and anger at the years of deceit that had led to this moment. Detective Harris returned from the house, his face grim. "We found the scarf," he confirmed, holding up an evidence bag. The bloodstains were faint but unmistakable under the beam of his flashlight. "We'll have it analyzed, but from what you've said, it's not looking good for your husband." The wife nodded, her heart sinking. She had hoped that exposing the affair would be enough, but now the layers of Mark's darkness seemed endless. The missing money, the argument with Sam Carter, the scarf, it all pointed to something far worse than infidelity. Just then Harris's radio crackled to life. "Suspect sighted near the woods," a voice reported. "Heading west on foot." Harris grabbed his radio. "Stay on him. Do not engage until backup arrives," he ordered, his tone sharp. He turned to the wife. "He's heading for the woods. If he's guilty, and I think we both know he is, he's trying to destroy evidence or hide something." The wife's stomach churned. The woods were where neighbors had last seen Mark and Sam arguing. Was it possible that the answers to Sam's disappearance were buried there, literally and figuratively? "I want to come with you," she said suddenly, her voice firm. Harris hesitated. "That's not a good idea," he said. "This could get dangerous." "I need to know," she insisted. "I need to see the truth for myself." After a moment, Harris relented, nodding toward one of the officers to accompany her. The group quickly mobilized, flashlights cutting through the dark as they headed toward the woods. The path was uneven, the silence broken only by the crunch of leaves underfoot and the occasional rustle of branches. As they moved deeper into the forest, the wife's mind raced with possibilities. What would they find? Would Mark surrender, or would he try to fight his way out? A sharp whistle from ahead stopped the group in their tracks. Another officer emerged from the shadows, his expression tense. "We've found something," he said, "but you're going to want to see this for yourself." The group moved cautiously toward a clearing, where the beam of a flashlight illuminated a shallow, hastily covered grave. The wife felt her breath catch in her throat as the realization hit her. Sam Carter. Harris crouched near the disturbed earth, his jaw tightening as he signaled for the team to begin an excavation. It didn't take long for them to uncover what they had feared, a body. The wife turned away, tears streaming down her face, but she forced herself to look. She had to. Harris straightened, his face grim as he glanced back at her. "It's him," he confirmed quietly. "Sam Carter." Before anyone could respond, the sound of footsteps crashing through the underbrush sent a jolt of adrenaline through the group. Flashlights whipped toward the noise, illuminating Mark as he stumbled into the clearing, his face streaked with sweat and dirt. "Stop right there!" Harris barked, his weapon drawn. Mark froze, his chest heaving as he raised his hands slowly. His eyes darted to the grave, then to his wife. "It's not what you think," he said, his voice trembling. "What is it then?" The wife spat, stepping forward despite the officer's protests. What could possibly explain this? The affair, the lies, the money, and now this? Mark's facade crumbled entirely. He fell to his knees, his hands still raised, tears streaming down his face. "It was an accident," he sobbed. "I didn't mean to kill him. We argued. He found out about the affair, threatened to tell everyone. I panicked. He lunged at me, and I didn't mean to." The wife's heart shattered, but not out of sympathy. It was the weight of realization that the man she had loved for 25 years was capable of such darkness. Harris stepped forward, his voice cold. "You had every chance to come clean, but instead you tried to cover it up. You lied to your wife, your friends, and your neighbors, and now you'll answer for all of it." As the officers moved to cuff Mark, the wife turned away, unable to watch. The weight of everything came crashing down, years of lies, the destruction of her family, and the horrifying reality of what Mark had done. The neighbor, who had been escorted to the scene, sobbed uncontrollably, her guilt written across her face. She hadn't been directly involved in the murder, but her role in the deception had contributed to the tragedy. As Mark was led away, the wife stood in the clearing, staring at the grave. The forest seemed to echo with the weight of what had been uncovered, not just Sam's body, but the dark truths that had festered in the shadows for years. For the first time in weeks, she felt a strange sense of clarity. The truth had come to light, no matter how painful it was. And while the road ahead would be long and difficult, she knew she had taken the first step toward reclaiming her life. The night sky above was still and silent, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. But deep within the wife's heart, a resolve began to form. She would move forward, not as the woman Mark had betrayed, but as the woman who had uncovered the truth and survived it.